Good morning, everyone. I felt like relaxing today, so I think I'm going to turn on the radio and listen to some of my favorite tunes. Must be something wrong with the battery. I see a decimal point, and then I see a 0, and then I see a 2. I guess that's supposed to tell me how much electricity is in the battery, but I don't actually know what that means. How do I read decimals like that? Oh, I guess I need to figure that out before I know how much power is in my battery. Let's take a look. Let's start with something we're already experts in, which is finding fractions in pictures. Here are 6 pictures, and what I want you to do is try and find 4/10ths in each of them. 4/10ths. Okay, let's see what you saw. Starting on the left, we've got our circle, and I would color in 4 of the slices because it's divided into 10 equal pieces. In the top middle, we have a grid that is divided into 100 pieces. 10 of them would be 1/10, which means that 40 of them would be 4/10ths. 10, 20, 30, 40. On the top right, we've got a rectangle divided into 10 pieces, so 4 of them would be 4/10ths. In the bottom left, we have another rectangle divided into 10 pieces, so 4 of them would be 4/10ths. In the bottom middle, we have a number line between 0 and 1, so we'd have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be 4/10ths. And then on the bottom right, we have 10 circles, so we'd have to circle 4 of them, and that would be 4/10ths of the circles. So we know pretty well how to represent tenths as pictures. How do we represent them as decimals again? What we need to do is take a look at the digit in the numerator, and then put that digit in the tenths place. So 1/10 is the same as 1 in the tenths place. 2/10 is the same as 2 in the tenths place. 7/10 is the same as 7 in the tenths place. Pretty easy. And something you should know, this is something that scientists do sometimes to save some time. Since 0 doesn't really mean anything. Yes, that's right, 0, you mean nothing. Sorry to break it to you. Goodbye, 0, go cry somewhere else. Because 0 means nothing, you can just get rid of the 0 altogether at the beginning and write it something like this. 0.1, 0.2, 0.7. It's not something that you would usually do in math, but it's something that scientists say all the time. Anyways, now that we know how to convert fractions into decimals, I'm going to give you a try. Here are some fractions. The ones at the top are easy. The ones at the bottom are hard because they are not written as tenths. So you're going to have to convert them into tenths first by multiplying the numerator and the denominator, and then write them as decimals. Again, the ones on the top are easy because they're already tenths. The one on the bottom you have to turn into fractions of tenths before you can write it as a decimal. Press pause to try it out. Press play to check your answers. Okay, welcome back. So we take a look at the top over here. It says 3/10ths. So what are we going to do? Put 3 in the tenths place. Over here it says 8/10ths. So what are you going to do? Put 8 in the tenths place. Over here it says 5/10ths. So what are you going to do? Put 5 in the tenths place. Now if we look on the bottom row, it says 2/5ths. Well, that's not a tenth. What are we going to do? How can we convert the denominator into a denominator of 10? Well, 5 times 2 is 10. And then we have to multiply the numerator by the same thing. 2 times 2 is 4. So 2/5 equals 4/10ths. So we put 4 in the tenths place. In the bottom middle we have 1/2. That's also not a tenth. What are we going to do? Denominator is 2. How can we turn 2 into 10? Multiply it by 5. And since we did it to the denominator, we have to do it to the numerator. So 1/2 is the same as 5/10. And you write 5/10 by putting 5 in the tenths place. And finally, we have 4/5. Well, 5 is not a 10. How do we turn it into a 10? Multiply it by 2, which means we do the same thing to the numerator. So 4/5 is the same as 8/10. How do you write 8/10? You put 8 in the tenths place. Here's another one for you to do. What I'm showing you is a bunch of fraction sticks, and each stick has a different fraction of them colored in red. So what I'm asking you to do is tell me what fraction is colored in red, but I want you to also write it as a decimal. So write it as a fraction of 10, and then also as a decimal. Press pause to try it out. Press play to check your answers. Welcome back. Okay, let's move from left to right. In the first one, we have 4 out of the 10 pieces colored in, so that's 4/10. How do you write that? You put 4 in the tenths place. The next one has all of them colored in, so you could write that as 10/10, an improper fraction. How would you write 10/10? Well, 10/10 is the same as 1 whole. So you could just write it as 1. Or I could write it as 1.0, just to show that there are no extra pieces in the tenths place, there are just wholes. That's a tricky one. Next one's not so tricky. I can see that there are 7 of the pieces colored in, so 7/10. And you put 7 in the tenths place. Next one, I see 3 of the 10 pieces colored in, so 3/10. So you put 3 in the tenths place. Next one, I see 6 of the 10 pieces colored in, so I put 6 in the tenths place. Next one, I see 9 of the 10 pieces colored in, so I put 9 in the tenths place. And finally, last one, I see 5 of the 10 pieces colored in, so you put 5 in the tenths place. Are you ready to look at hundredths? For hundredths, instead of dividing something up into 10 pieces, of course you have to divide it up into 100 pieces. And each of those pieces is going to be very small. For all of my hundredths examples today for pictures, I'm using the art of Vincent van Gogh. I'm sure you'll recognize one of his paintings, it's rather famous. But a lot of them are rather beautiful, so I wanted to show you a number of his paintings, or at least part of the paintings, based on what fraction I'm showing you. So, what fraction of this painting am I showing? I've divided the painting up into 100 pieces, and I'm showing how many of them? 13. So I'm showing 13 hundredths of the picture. How would I write that in decimals? Well, you'd write it something like this. And it seems to make sense. 13 hundredths, and over here, 13 hundredths. You've got a 1 in the tenths place, and a 3 in the hundredths place. Well, that was pretty easy, so I think you can just try it out yourself. Here are 3 paintings by Vincent van Gogh, and what I want you to do is to just tell me what fraction of each painting you can see, and then turn that fraction into a decimal. Press pause to try it out. Press play to check your answers. Welcome back. I hope you did your counting very carefully. We're going to check now. In the first painting to the left, I can see there are 47 squares of the painting that I can see. The rest is white. 47 out of 100, which means 47 hundredths. In the painting in the middle, there are 52 squares that I can see. 52 out of 100, 52 hundredths. And finally on the right, this is the one that most people remember, the Starry Night. And there are 44 squares that you can see from the painting. So 44 hundredths. Now all of the ones that I've shown you so far, there are more than 10 squares that you can see. But what if I show you fewer than 10 hundredths in a picture? How would you write that as a decimal? Here's my example, 9/100ths. How would you write 9/100ths? Would you write it like that? There's something wrong with that. It looks wrong. Why is that wrong? Oh, it's because this says 9/10ths. And you know it says 9/10ths because 9 is in the tenths place. So how would you put 9/100ths? You'd put 9 in the hundredths place. Okay, that makes sense. 9/100ths. You need to put a 0 here. Otherwise, 9 ends up in the tenths place instead of the hundredths place. And which one's larger? 9/10ths or 9/100ths? If you just thought about the word hundredths and tenths, you might think, oh, well, 100 is more than 10, so 9/100ths is going to be more than 9/10ths. But no. Because what does it mean, 9/100ths? It means that the object is broken into 100 pieces and you have 9 of those pieces. Whereas with 9/10ths, you've broken the object into 10 groups and you have 9 of those groups. So as you can see, 9/100ths is a lot less than 9/10ths. Keep that in mind. And I'm going to show you some more paintings, and I want you to do exactly the same thing you did before. What fraction and what decimal of each painting is shown? Press pause to try it out. Press play to check your answers. Okay, let's check your answers. Starting on the left, there are 5/100ths of the picture shown. Now make sure you don't make the same mistake I did. Make sure you put that 0 there when you write it as a decimal. 0.05. That's how you write 5/100ths as a decimal. One in the middle. 16 of the pieces are colored in. 0.16 or 16/100ths. And finally the one on the right. How did you count this one? I can think of a number of ways to count this one, but how did you count how many squares of the painting you can see? Did you go, okay, this is 10 and this is 10, so 10 plus 10 is 20, minus the one that overlaps, 19? Did you count 7 plus 2 and then 4 plus 5 and then add 1? Did you calculate 2 times 5 plus 4 times 2 plus 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 times 7 plus 5 times 7, and then add those all together and then subtract that from 100 to find out what's left? Well, you could do it, although it would take a long time. Did you push these bars to the side in your mind and then realize that the white squares is a 9 times 9 grid and then say 9 times 9 is 81 and then 100 minus 81 is 19? There are a lot of different ways you could do it. Some of them are easier than others, but some of them are more interesting than others. Regardless of how you did it, it's 19/100ths, and that's how you'd write it as a decimal. With these next ones, I want you to not only find the answer, but try and figure out as many ways as possible to try and figure out which squares are colored in. And I'll tell you some of the ways that I did it. Press pause to try it out. Press play to check your answers. Okay, so let me tell you how I figured these out. So what I did is I said this is, each of these horizontal rows is 10, so 10, 20, 30. And then I know that this is 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8, and then this is 3, and then 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 plus 8 is 14, so 30 plus 14 is 44, 44/100ths. How did I figure out the middle one? With the middle one, I said that the columns are 9, because this one overlaps, so we'll count it later. So 9, 9, 9. 3 times 9 is 27. And then 27 plus 10 is 37. And then 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. 41/100ths. And that's how you write 41/100ths as a decimal. And then for the one on the right, what I did is I figured out what was the white space. So the white space is 8 times 8. 8 times 8 is 64. 100 minus 64 is 36. And so it's 36 hundredths. And so the fraction is 36 hundredths, and that's how you'd write it as a decimal. There are so many different ways that you can figure out what fraction of an image is colored in. These are just a few of them that I showed you. When you're trying to figure out what fraction is colored in, I want you to think about as many different ways as possible. Because one of the really cool things about mathematics is that there are different ways to find out the same answer. And it's cool to hear how other people are figuring it out, because it sort of gives you an insight into how their mind works. Anyways, that's how you write hundredths as decimals. Okay, so if I take a look at my battery power here again, I see the decimal point, and then I see a 0, and then I see 2. 2 is in the hundredths place, so I guess I have 2 hundredths of a volt. That's not very much. I guess I really do need to charge my batteries. Well, I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to charge my batteries somehow. While I do that, I want you to finish page 223 in your junk math book and then complete the quiz that pops up later. And hopefully I'll be listening to some music this afternoon. Cheers!